Okay. We're on Bays number Bays. New piece. Mishum Rabbi Akiva Amru. The name of Rabbi Akiva, they say the following. We're going back on what we said in the Mishnah, in the Brisa, that Rabbi Akiva said, Af Edom Zomim Meshamim al pi atzmam. That Edom Zomim don't pay based on their own admission, right? That if they turn themselves in, they're not going to pay, even though we have the rule. Even though we have a rule, you're supposed to do to them what they wanted to do to others, but we say that if they go ahead and they turn themselves in, and we have to explain what that means. If they turn themselves in, they do not pay al pi atzma. The Edom Zomim don't pay al pi atzma. Everyone, you found it, or what? You have the link? Or you don't have the link? Okay, so it says the Edom Zomim do not pay al pi atzma. Okay, very good. I see it's here. Someone's coming to join Yaron, so it's good. Oh, that's you? Okay, very good. So the Edom Zomim don't pay al pi atzma. Okay, so now the Gemara is trying to understand the reason of Rabbi Akiva. Okay? Yeah, Rabbi Akiva was, according to Rashi, the case is the following. The witnesses were found guilty in court number 1. They were found guilty of framing somebody. But the court did not assess, let's say, a penalty, a fine, how much money they have to pay for framing this person. And then they go to another court. Once the court would have assessed a dollar amount, they would have said that, you know what, you have to pay a certain amount of money for what you've done wrong. Then if they would go to another court and they would turn themselves in and admit, we owe this amount of money, the court will say, fine, you have to pay it. Like any time a person admits that they owe money. But the first court did not say an amount of money you have to pay a certain amount of money. The only thing the first court did was they accepted the second pair of witnesses to prove that the first pair of witnesses are false. That's all that happened. So once they did not yet say that you owe a certain amount of money, they did not create an obligation yet of money yet, because the obligation of money does not come until the court says you're obligated this money. So if they run to another court and they admit in the other court that they were found framers in court number 1, then they're patur in court. So some understand they're patur in court number 2. Court number 2 will not go ahead and obligate them the money based on their admission in court number 2. Court number 1 could still obligate them the money. And the question is, why can't court number 2 obligate them money based on their admission? They admitted that they were found zomim in a certain court, and they admitted they found zomim at a certain court and they wanted to frame a guy to pay a certain amount of money. So why can't the second court obligate these witnesses money based on their own admission? So that's the question of the Gemara. My timer. What's the reason of Rabbi Akiva? Now we are now 3 lines from the bottom. The last word of you have it, Dr. Navid, 3 lines from the bottom. My timer. The Rabbi Akiva Kasava Kenosahu. Yaron, you sent to the group that we're on. If you want to send to the group. Kenosahu. Edom Zomim, he looks at as a knas. It's a fine. And since Edom Zomim is a fine, he holds the punishment of Edom Zomimim is the idea of a fine. It's not that we look at it like the fact that you wanted to create a financial loss to the person. We look at it like a financial responsibility, financial obligation, like a compensation for what you attempted to do. And we look at it as if you did that loss to that, caused that loss to the person. No, we don't look at it as a monetary compensation. rather as a fine, a penalty. A penalty, like I said, a parking ticket, fine. Or the Torah goes ahead and says, like I've mentioned, when a person steals and he pays double, that extra double that a person pays, that's a fine. Morning, Mr. Haber. That's a fine. That part is a fine. And therefore, since he looks at it as a fine, when you turn yourself in, the pasuk says, Asher Yashiun Elohim, that when the court finds you guilty, then you have to pay that extra fine, that fine. But if the court did not find you guilty, you went ahead and you turned yourself in. So then the law of a fine doesn't apply. There's no obligation of a fine in that situation. Good morning, Jaime.
Morning.
Good morning. So we are on Bays number Bays 2B and 2B and the art scroll, it's 2B4. It's the end of the page of art scroll 2B4. My time with Rabbi Akiva, he holds kenosahu. It's a fine. He holds Edom Zomim, the idea of witnesses paying out money for attempting to frame somebody, to cause someone else to pay the money. They look at it as a penalty, as a fine, and the rule is, there's a general rule that ein mishalem uknas, a fine, ein mishalem, you do not pay al pi, through the mouth atzmo, on your own mouth. Based on your own admission, you don't pay for a fine if you turn yourself in. If witnesses come and say you did something which obligates you a fine, you have to pay the fine because you didn't turn yourself in. But because then the court turned you in. If the court turns you in, you have to pay the fine. You admit to a fine, you turn yourself in, there's no obligation of a fine. God bless you. If you admit not to a fine, you admit to something that you owe because of compensation for someone, because you did something to somebody, you took money away from somebody, and now you owe the guy the money. So if you turn yourself in, you have to pay it. I say I owe you $100, and I turn myself into question. I owe $100. I got to pay $100. I owe you $100 because that money that I said I owed you was not coming as a penalty. I didn't admit to a penalty, to a fine. I admitted to what I took money. I got to give back money. But here, by Edom Zomim, I did not take money. The witnesses did not take money. They attempted to frame somebody to take that he should lose money. And the Torah gives us this punishment that they gotta pay. That Rabbi Akiva says that's a penalty. That's a penalty. It's a fine, because really you did not cause a loss of money. So if you didn't cause a loss of money, and yet the Torah obligates you to pay, so that's a penalty. And such a thing that's a penalty. You turn yourself in. You're off. You don't have to pay. It's called modeh biknas. Admitting to a penalty, patu. You admit to a penalty, you're patu. By the way, I'm going to try, when we learn the Gemara, I was asked if we could try to focus on the words a little more of the Gemara. People pick up more on their vocabulary. So I'm going to try to translate the words of the Gemara a little bit more, a little more focus on the translation. So hopefully people will pick up more of their vocabulary. As we saw Yaron read the Gemara at the Siyum. We saw that. We hope more people will be reading the Gemara at the next Siyum. So the Gemara says, many of you everyone could have read it, but we know Yaron was the one who did it. Now, so the Gemara says the following. And we also had Morris did also. So the Gemara says the following. Omar Rabba, 2 lines from the bottom on the page. Omar Rabba, Teda, I'm going to bring you a proof. I'm going to bring you a proof to Rabbi Akiva's opinion that the punishment for Edom Zomim, for being false, for framing someone, is not a monetary punishment. It's not called compensation. Rather, it's called a penalty. Teda means like a proof. Teda, you shall know. I want to show you how you're going to know it. You know how you're going to know it? It's a proof. What? Yes. The Gemara is trying to find out how do you view the obligation when the Torah obligates the witnesses who frame somebody and they have to pay what they wanted to cause the other person to happen to the other person. How do you look at that payment? You see, it's not enough to know the law. You have to know what's behind the law. You have to know what the reason for the law is. And because if you understand, how do you interpret the law? Because based on your analysis of understanding what the law is, what's behind the law, or what it's all about, then it has ramifications. Just by identifying what the payment of framers are, once you identify what type of payment it is, then it's going to have ramifications. That's what the Gemara is saying. Once we identify that the general payment of witnesses who frame someone is classified as a knas, as a penalty, then if the witnesses would come forward and admit before the court obligates them, then the witnesses will be exempt because it's under the classification of a knas, of a fine.
They're exempt from all penalty if they admit it?
Okay. So that from the language of the Gemara, the language of Modeh B'Knas would have to see if all the commentaries would agree to that. But the Modeh B'Knas, the general rule would be, as long as if we classify Adam Zomim as Knas, which would mean anytime they frame somebody, it's the penalty that the Torah is giving because they just attempted. So then all the cases should be, whether it's capital punishment, whether it's money, or whether it's all those cases should be categorized under knas. However, there is this, I saw in one of the commentaries this morning. One of the commentaries this morning said that the language of the Rambam. See, when we learned the Gemara, the language of the Gemara says it's called a knas, Adam Zomim. So it would seem from the language of the Gemara, there's no difference between any time it's Adam Zomim, anytime they frame, and the Torah creates this penalty, which is not, because the Gemara is going to say, what's the reason why Adam Zomim is a penalty? Why? Because why is it a penalty, a fine? Because they didn't actually do anything based on their testimony. Nothing happened. The guy did not pay the money. The guy did not kill the guy.
One second. I don't agree with that. If they put somebody at risk and they go on trial for capital punishment, the distress that person feels while they're accused of being a crime of capital punishment, and then 6 months into the trial or halfway through the trial, they come forward and said, "Oh, sorry, we were just kidding." They're exempt, and the person suffered the risk of capital punishment and all the distress.
Okay, so again, we're going to give them malkut, we're going to give them lashes, and we saw the interesting. We're going to give them lashes for such a thing. Again, they turned themselves in. They're going to get malkut, and Hashem will deal with it. God will. At least they turned themselves in, Jaime.
So
Imagine if they didn't turn themselves in. They turned themselves in. What?
They do get lashes?
They're gonna get lashes. They're gonna get lashes because they framed somebody.
Okay.
They're gonna get lashes. The Rambam says
there is a penalty. The penalty is lashes.
You're saying when they turn themselves in, you're saying?
Yes.
Oh, so that's all right. That's also a matter of discussion. Some say they will get lashes. They will just will not do to them what they wanted to do to the other guy, but lashes they will get. There are some opinions that say that they will get lashes. Now, even if people will learn they won't get lashes, Hashem will. They're not. There's no such thing. People are off the hook. They're gonna, either the court will give him lashes. That's how some understand. The Minchas Chinuch discusses this issue, but even if the court won't give them, Hashem will deal with it. So they're not going to get off the hook.
Rabbi, just to challenge that, if the default answer is no one gets away with it, Hashem will deal with it, why have a court at all?
Okay, we have a court under certain situations when they don't turn themselves in.
Okay.
We want, maybe we want to encourage, maybe this idea perhaps of wanting to encourage people to turn themselves in when they and maybe that could also serve as, you know, as an encouragement. That's like the police department. The police department is very happy when people turn themselves in, turn in the guns. They say sometimes, you know, you have a gun, illegal gun, you turn it in, we'll look away. They're happy about that. So obviously people will know that they turned themselves in, and it's going to be a great embarrassment that they attempted to do such a thing to somebody. So some say they would get lashes, and even if technically, even if we'll say that they don't, even if they wouldn't get lashes, they're going to, obviously, Hashem will deal with them accordingly, whatever needs to be done. But in a certain sense, it seems like they're doing tshuva by turning themselves in. It's a sign of repentance. They are coming forward and they're saying that you know, we did something wrong. We did something very terribly wrong. So that's how we could explain it. You know, try to give a little explanation what will happen as a result of them turning themselves in. Yes.
That we cannot do kasha zaman, so we can never do the Malcolm group, right? So it's not a class. The class will be only if we can do kasha zaman, we have to do the class to be done in that class, and that will apply to me as a kasha zaman. This is not the class.
Again, but the whole concept that you could go ahead and punish somebody for attempting to do something, right? Generally speaking, if a person attempted to do a sin, okay, they did a sin, they testified falsely. Attempting to do something to somebody in general, if I attempted to hit somebody with my hand and I didn't hit the person, I'm not punished for attempting to hit the person. I threw a punch at somebody, right? And I attempted to hurt the person. Well, what? And I missed. Will the court go ahead and give me lashes for attempting? No. I didn't do it. I had intention to do it. But I didn't do it. I didn't cause the court. There's no allocation. The court doesn't get involved in such a case. So here, I attempted to cause a $10,000 loss of money for the guy. I attempted $1 million. I wanted to lose $1 million. Two witnesses came to court. We wanted the guy to lose $1 million. But at the end of the day, he didn't lose $1 million. We attempted to make him lose $1 million. Either let's say two witnesses came and said, you guys, you weren't making up a story. You wanted him to lose $1 million. You said you borrowed $1 million. He never borrowed. You can't testify that he borrowed $1 million because you were with us on the date that you say that you were there. You were witness to this $1 million loan. Or $1 billion loan, you with us on that day. So now, let's say it's $1 million, and at the end of the day, it didn't happen. Witnesses found you, testified against you guys. What do we say? We say you have to pay. The witness have to pay $1 million. You have to pay $1 million to the guy that you framed. $1 million. But I framed the guy. I attempted to make a loss of him, but he didn't lose anything. He didn't lose the $1 million. I attempted for someone to lose $1 million, but he didn't get it. He didn't lose it. The Torah says, you know what? You have to pay $1 million. So Rabbi Akiva says, that's not a compensation. Compensation, that's not the normal compensation. When we talk about financial obligation, when you cause a loss, normal compensation is you cause a loss of money to somebody, now you have to compensate, you have to pay it back. Rather, he says, the Torah is being, Jaime, here the Torah is being extremely strong on the guys. The Torah says you got to pay $1 million. The witness have to pay $1 million. So that is a penalty. What, Timothy? It's a penalty. It's a fine. It's a fine. We're fining you. We're giving you a fine. You didn't cause a loss of $1 million to the guy. You tried to cause a loss of $1 million to the guy. You weren't said, in the court of law in America, we know attempted murder. Attempted murder, a guy shoots somebody. He attempted to kill him, but we don't say attempted murder is murder, like murder. We don't treat it like murder. We don't treat
Is it attempted murder is a serious crime?
Serious crime, 100%. But it's not. But it's not. But
Not
it's,
as-
the guy missed. He missed. He shot the guy and he missed. What? How many years is he going to sit in prison for that? Compared to a guy who killed who actually was successful in killing somebody. But by us, by the Torah, by the witnesses, specifically by the witnesses, when the witnesses listen, if a person in the Jewish law, a person attempts to shoot somebody and he misses and he doesn't kill him, we don't kill the guy for attempting to murder somebody. But yet, when it comes to witnesses, when they attempt to murder somebody, we will kill them. So the Torah, when it comes to witnesses, Jaime, the Torah is very, very strong under certain circumstances. When it comes to witnesses framing somebody, a person can actually get capital punishment for framing somebody, even though the guy never got killed. But in this circumstance, the fact that you turn yourself in, you're not gonna get the punishment that you wanted to give to that guy, that you attempted to do to that guy.
This is a safeguard for the Torah to prevent.
This is a safeguard. It's not gonna be said. Perhaps that the Torah wants to be create a safeguard that people should not frame anybody, and therefore the Torah goes ahead and says that if you frame somebody, you have to pay what you have to get. You got to punish what you attempted to do to that person, which is it right? Which is nothing happened, and that's what the Gemara is going to say right now. It's a fine, right? What do you say? There's a reward. What do you say?
There's a reward
for coming forward. Right. Now I want to look at the Rambam. I want to take out the Rambam for 1 second.
Let's say if he was caught framing them for murder, he's not going to be killed.
Okay, we'll get out the Rambam and the laws of Eidos. What did you say? Okay. So, thank you. So the Rambam in Hilchos Eidut. The Rambam is in chapter 18, law number 8. We're going to look at the Rambam Maimonides. Chapter 18, law number 8. Let's see how he codifies this law. He says the following. He says, you see, to address Jaime's question, the Rambam states that the obligation of Edom Zomim to pay, when they wanted to obligate, he seems to identify the penalty that he calls a knas when it comes to money issues. But when it comes to, the Rambam does not say, when it comes to other issues, let's say they attempted to murder somebody, or they attempted to create lashes for somebody, the Rambam might not consider that a penalty. He might consider that, we might look at that in a different category, even though the logic of our Gemara seems to categorize as a penalty, but he might look at it as something else, and therefore the Rambam might, turning yourself in, from the Rambam we don't see that if you turn yourself in capital punishment, or you turn yourself in when it comes to obligating, you frame someone on lashes, that you get off the hook from capital punishment. From the Rambam, just to address Jaime, because Jaime asked the question, is it fear and so on and so forth, he specifically mentions by money cases, when the witnesses turn themselves in. So it could be that there is some difference between turning yourself in on monetary cases for turning yourself in on when you frame someone for some higher, different type of punishment. But that to me, that's not, the simple reading, the Gemara does not seem to make a distinction. And, it's also based on different texts of the Gemara, because you're going to look at the language of the Gemara right now. You're going to see this point right now. Amar Rabbah. Rabbah says, Teda, you shall know, I'm going to prove that it's considered a penalty. Shahari lo asu ma'aseh. They did not do any action. The action wasn't done to the defendant. The one they framed was nothing happened to him. And yet, v'neheragin. So you see it's in brackets. You see the word neheragin, you see the brackets around it. So according to the brackets, it shows you that it's going on both, not only on financial cases, even on cases of capital punishment, which was you brought up beforehand. So neheragim, that the witnesses will get killed. According to this text, they will get killed for framing somebody, and the Gemara is using this as a proof to identifying that it's called a fine. Even in both cases, even when we kill the witnesses, we look at it like a fine. And how do we prove that it's a fine? Because nothing happened to the defendant, and yet v'neragin, the witnesses still get killed for framing someone the court did nothing to. The court did not execute the guy they framed. And yet we're going to execute the witnesses. So doesn't that show you, Ariel, that the witnesses, that the concept of Adam Zomer is a penalty, a fine, because nothing happened based on the testimony, and yet we're going to kill them. We're going to kill them, u'mishalmim. In some cases, they're going to pay money for even nothing happened. Nothing happened to the defendant, and they owe the defendant money. What happened? I double parked my car. Nothing happened. I didn't do anything to anybody. I didn't cause a loss of money, and yet I got to pay a $115 ticket. What is that? That's a penalty. That's a fine. I didn't do anything. I was in the bus lane. What did I do? What did I cause a loss of money? And yet you give me a $115 ticket. Yes.
Rabbi, if you don't take this position, which is more logical to me, then you're basically saying one of the Aseret HaDibrot, Ed Sheker, is something you could attempt to do and then walk away from scot-free. So this statement makes much more sense to me.
Very good. Right. Again, right. The Torah says, don't be a false witness. Right. The Torah says, don't be a false witness. And now sometimes there are certain things there are certain types of sins. Not all sins are punishable by a court down here, right? A guy speaks negative about another Jew, court down here is not going to punish this guy. But if a guy testifies falsely, so we found in the Gemara, so we find different types of possible punishments. Sometimes it will be do to them what they wanted to do to the other guy. Sometimes it will be lashes. So now the Gemara, and it's possible that sometimes the court might not give any punishment. That's some people might learn that way. Now, yes. Someone steals money from another Jew. Terrible, terrible person, by the way. That's the case. Right, a guy steals money. Only the principal, right? If a guy stole $100 from another Jew, if witnesses turn him in, he has to pay double. If he turns himself in, he pays exactly what he stole and nothing more than that. He does not need to pay double because he turned himself in. Because that extra double, was a fine, and that part of it, he's not going to have to pay that part, which is the fine part. You don't have to pay the principal that he stole. If you want to understand it that way, or there's other reasons for whatever, however you write. Okay, remember, Adam's very good. Adam's Domim did not actually do. They did not actually do an action like someone who stole. So it's a different type of sin. They spoke. They spoke. They attempted to cause a loss to someone. They never caused a loss to somebody, and we're punishing them anyway. Right. So the Gemara, what did it say? I'm not sure if there was a lot of Edom Zomim coming in, because usually people are very concerned with the 10 commandments. The Jaime mentioned 10 commandments. Torah says, we know the people took very seriously, people did not generally swear falsely. The Gemara has a position, one opinion, the Gemara, people that you suspected when it came to financial matters, they weren't so honest, but when it came to swearing falsely, they were very careful. It's 10 commandments, people took it, and maybe they recognize a serious punishment of swearing falsely. I would think it was not common to frame somebody. Also, honest people should not be doing these type of things. But we found in the Sefer Chinuch morning, we found the Sefer Chinuch a beautiful, interesting idea that people might frame somebody in the name of truth. What does that mean? If, let's say, you trust your friend and your friend has no witnesses to prove something, and you go ahead and you come to court to act as a proof to something your friend can't prove, and you know it's true, but your friend is honest. You believe your friend like anything. And yet, so what could happen? Two people might come into court and you have a friend. Your friend says, this guy borrowed $1,000 from me and was not honest. He's not paying it back. He's denying the whole thing. He borrowed $1,000, he's denying the whole thing. So now, if I would tell you that, so about it, I think hopefully you would trust me. And then you and Morris go to court and say, and you create a case, you say on a certain date, and it did happen on that day. It's true it happened on that day. But you guys, Dr. David and Mark, you weren't there to witness it. You're coming to court and saying the Reuven borrowed $1,000 from Shimon on that day. It's true, he might have borrowed $1,000, but you were not able to be there. You could not have been witness to it. So you might come to say a testimony about something that you might not be false, but you're false in that aspect because you were not there. You know what I'm saying? So it's possible to frame somebody. Usually we think about Edom Zomim that they're bad guys. They are bad guys. But I'm saying, usually you might think they're vicious, but they might not be vicious. They might be people that are just trying to create a proof for someone to collect something, which really rightfully belongs to that person. But if you're not there, you didn't see it, you can't go in court and say, I saw something. And if you do that, you're gonna have to pay for it. You have to pay exactly what you wanted to that guy. So now the Gemara says, remember, the bottom line is based on the base. So that proves that it's a penalty, and therefore that now you understand why Rabbi Akiva says that if you admit the penalty, you will not have to pay for it. Omar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, Teda. Rav Nachman, the language of Omar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, sounds like he's also coming to Teda. Teda, you should know, he's also showing us a proof. And the Gemara is going to say, it seems like he's saying the same thing as the other rabbi. And if he's saying the same thing as the other rabbi, so we should not say Omar Rav Nachman, it should say V'chein Omar. And Rav Nachman said the same thing. So that's what the Gemara, just give you a little preview of what the Gemara is about to do. Omar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, Teda. Shaharei mamod biyad bailim. The money, I'm bringing you a proof that Edom Zomim is a penalty, is a fine, because the money is in the hands of the person, the bailim, the defendant, the owner, that's bailim, the balabayim. He has the money in his hand, and even though he has the money in his hand, he didn't lose anything. Nothing was given up. Yet u'mishalmim. He has to go ahead and the witnesses have to pay, even though no money was taken out from the hands of the defendant, the guy that they framed. So the Gemara says, Ma nihu the lo asu ma'aseh. What does it mean that ma nihu? What does it mean that when we say that, well, Maniu, look at the Rashi, top Rashi. Maniu, you have the top Rashi? Now on Gimel Amid Aleph, Mazel Tov, Mabruk, we're on the second daf in the Masech. Maniu, hi, you have the top Rashi, Mr. Haber, the Rashi on Gimel Amid Aleph, top Rashi, right corner. You got it? Gimel, 3a. You got it, Ariel? Manihu. Hai momon biyad balav the Rav Nachman. When Rav Nachman says the money is in the hands of the original owner, that's the defendant. Hainu the lo also myself. That means that an action was not done yet. Shadayan lo shilem. He did not pay anything yet. The defendant, the guy who was framed, didn't pay. Ela shenigma dino l'shalem. There was a verdict of the court, nigmar dino, a conclusion of the court that he has to pay, but he didn't pay yet. And yet the witnesses have to pay. So the Gemara says, he's saying, Hainu de Rabbah, back to the Gemara. So he's saying, Rav Nachman is saying the same thing as Rabbah. So Rashi, remember, there's the point that you need to remember. When the Torah imposes this very big fine on the witnesses, that we got to do to the witnesses what they wanted to do to the other person, that's only what happened. That's only when the verdict was already done by the court, but it was not yet executed by the court. That means the court came to a conclusion based on the testimony of the witnesses. And the court said guilty. The defendant is guilty. The defendant owes the money. The defendant needs to get killed. The defendant needs to get lashes based on the first pair of witnesses. But if the first pair of witnesses come and they're framing somebody, and the court did not yet render a decision yet, a decision wasn't, they didn't give a verdict, and then two other witnesses come into court and say, you guys are with us. At that time, we will not do to the witnesses what they wanted to do to the other guy. This extreme, good morning. This, we want to call it extreme. And sometimes, you know, you got to be extreme. You know, it says you got to be extreme, you have to be extreme and never to get angry, right? You have to be extreme in that. Don't be that type of guy. Sometimes you have to be extreme about certain type of things in life. So the Torah is being extreme, if we want to refer to, I don't know if it's the right word to use, extreme in its serious, in the punishing witnesses who frame somebody, that for attempting to kill somebody, we're going to kill those witnesses, or attempting to cause a person to lose some money. Even though it didn't happen, we're going to punish the witnesses, but it would seem to be that's only when there was it went so far that there was an actual verdict based on the testimony. We call that a gemar din. There was a conclusion of the court based on the testimony of the witnesses, and then after there was a conclusion of the court, other witnesses walk in. But the court did not. Let's say when it comes to murder, the court did not actually murder the guy yet. The court went ahead and said we're going to guilty, and then witnesses come in. Then we're going to kill the first pair of witnesses who framed the guy. But if they're still deliberating, the court did not yet make a decision yet, and two other witnesses came in and say, hey, you guys, you with us? The court will not kill those witnesses. So Jaime's going to ask, they shouldn't get away with it, right? So we have to see what happens to them. Do they get lashes or they don't get lashes? But they're not going to get that punishment that they want to do to the other guy unless it went that far that there was a verdict of the court based on their testimony. What'd you say? There was a verdict, right? But if there was no verdict, what'd you say? What? Give me the case, doctor. Again, the first square witnesses, they framed somebody, and the court said guilty. Then second pair of witnesses come in. Second pair of witnesses, because the second pair of witnesses are saying, you guys had no right to testify. You with us in a different place. It's not closed. Very good. It's not closed. They don't.
So then it could always go on and on.
Okay, it's a good question. I mean, it's a good question. Is there any time period that they would not allow witnesses. But from our, we see, even though the court made a verdict guilty, two witnesses have the ability to come in and say, you guys are with us, and they're going to, and they'll test, if they can prove that those two, they check the second pair of witnesses out, we believe the second pair of witnesses, and we're going to do to the first pair of witnesses what they want to do to the first guy. And throw out the verdict. Exactly. That would have a new verdict. Have a great day, everybody. Right. Okay. It depends. It depends. We have to. That's a question. That's a question we have to discuss more about the Makkos on the witnesses under certain circumstances. Which point? No, but again, if two witnesses come in, okay, if two witnesses come in and say that the witnesses that were accepted in this case, what? But you know what? If those witnesses are framing these guys, if we have two other witnesses that say that, we can also make them zomim too. So there's always a they're putting themselves. That's what it seems like. Say it again. Right. Right. Exactly. That's what it seemed like. Chodesh Tov, everybody.